for some people, like, and including myself, like I had this very clear expectation of what I wanted to do and how my life was going to plan out. But that's not how life works out, and that's not always how life happens. And sometimes you do have to be open to the opportunities that come about and open to letting yourself grow in different spaces.
Good morning. Hello. Welcome, guys, back to another episode. So today we are speaking to Verusha Maharaj. So Verusha is the managing director of the Red and Yellow Creative School here in Cape Town. Now, why are we speaking to her and how do we know her? Technically, we don't know her at all. Like many of our guests, we found a LinkedIn post, and this one in particular was about the Red and Yellow School hosting an formative event for creatives, graduates in industry and still going into industry about a few various topics. And one was around the metaverse and why creatives should care about the metaverse and how creatives should be thinking about it. And that was the initial probe that kind of drew me to message Verusha and set up a little bit of a catch-up call. But her journey, I think, in particular is quite interesting. We'll let her get into the details, but in a very summary view, she's also been in industry, managing creatives herself, and now she is in the educational space, seeing like the other side of it, people going into industry. So that will be a little bit of the broad stroke topics that we'll be covering today, amongst many other things, maybe our Saturday plans, maybe the way we like our coffee, who knows. But Verusha, thanks so much for chatting to us, especially making time on a Saturday morning.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much, guys, for having me.
Yeah, I think this is going to be great. I mean, the previous episodes we've had with people who are both in education and has been in industry or currently in industry has been really informative and almost enlightening, so to say, the discussions we've had. So I think we're quite excited about it. I think Alfie in particular, because he also has not a newfound interest, but just a love for education and the methodologies used for mentorship and
Awesome.
Definitely. I really am looking forward to this one, but I think maybe even more than my typical interest in education, one of the things that I really like when I sort of look at your journey so far is that not only have you been on both sides of the wall, but you've also kind of played in a specific kind of role, which is at the Creative Council. I'm quite interested to kind of like hear how that sort of evolved and how your thinking about everything has evolved. Because I know, when you're a student, you've got a certain idea of what the professional space is and what's out there waiting for you. And then you get there and it's not what you expect. But then also your perspective changes. And then when you think back even to what learning institutions are like, your idea starts to change when you're in the working environment. So it's always a refreshing experience to hear someone who's kind of got both sides of the story.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a very atypical journey.
And maybe let's start there. Maybe give us a bit of an idea. Like, how did you first getting into the professional environment? Like, how did your career start off?
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned the Creative Council and you mentioned, your expectations and then going into the industry, what that's like compared to when you're being educated. And it's a bit different for me because I actually started at med school. So
Oh, wow.
I was convinced that I was going to become a doctor. That was like the only thing that I knew. And I also grew up in a time where it was like only one of 4 well-recognized professions that you could go into, being a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, and maybe a teacher or an engineer, like those were the options that were pushed
Sure.
all throughout high school. And I thought that I would make a really good doctor, and I went to med school. So I left KZN and then I went to Wits medical school. And then along the way, there were lots of things and various factors that influenced my decision and made me realize that it wasn't actually for me and not what I wanted to do. One of those things was my dad had passed away during my first year of final exams. It was just not a good time, and it just made me reflect and put a lot of things into perspective for me. I went into the second year like not really feeling it, but my mom was like, you are doing this because this is what you said you wanted to do. And I think at some point in my high school journey, I did really feel like that's what I wanted to do, but something changed. I think maybe being in it and the experience like gave me a new perspective. And by the end of the second year, got the courage to, kind of push back at my mom, which, in an Indian household is not an easy thing to do. And I had already in the background, like applied in the School of Accounting. I knew that I didn't want to do like medicine anymore, but I didn't know what else, there was. And like I said, like the 4 options, I looked at my matric results. I was like, well, accounting was actually my highest mark, so maybe I should do like Bachelor of Accounting or like a BCom. So I applied there without telling my mom, and I got the acceptance
As
and all of that. Exactly,
Love you, moms.
I know, I was gonna say like peace to all the moms out there. We still love you. And so I changed.
I'm not sure I understand.
Siri is trying to tell me something. Even Siri doesn't understand what I was trying to do back then. So I went into that school, the School of Finance and Accounting, and somewhere along the way, it just happened by chance. It was a bit of a difficult situation. I didn't come from a wealthy background at all. It took a lot actually to be able to send me to Wits. I was on a part scholarship at one point, and I had a friend who was doing some promotional work, and she said to me, "Do you want to come and like just help, do some work on the weekends? You can earn extra money and it gives you some experience." Like, yeah, of course. So I was a promo girl, for the Creative Council, and I was doing, so it's kind of how it all started. And as you can imagine, it was not very glamorous, but we did what we had to do back then. And somewhere along the way, they kind of said, well, okay, you're doing promo work. I was, always very diligent in my studies and just in general. And I think that comes from being an eldest child, maybe. And people said to me at the Creative Council, well, like you're always submitting your stuff on time. You always get to work on time. You're like a star brand ambassador. Don't you want to supervise the people that are doing the promotional work? Like, sure, I can do that. So I started doing more and more until eventually they said to me, well, we've actually got an admin office job and we think that like you could do that. I said, hell yeah. I mean, it's more money and like I only have classes on some days a week. I went
so you're still a student at this point?
I was still a student.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was using that money for my transport and food and all of that, so that I didn't have to put any pressure on my mom. And I think it was, now I'm going really quite back in time, 2007. This is when the office job opportunity came about. And they then said to me, like, don't you want to just come in like 5 days a week? And do this job permanently. Then I thought to myself, like, I'm studying so that I can get a degree, and that degree is supposed to get me a job so that I can get money. Why can't I just like get the job now, So again, my mom was not impressed with this trajectory. It was not what she had in mind at all when she sent me to Wits. But I took on that job and I switched to part-time. And that's how I started at the Creative Council. So I was officially permanent in 2008 and worked my way up from there.
Sure. From just listening to you, it's actually such a beautiful story. And hearing how some people kind of figure out very accidentally what they're good at, their skills. life kind of throws you a random opportunity and your intention is something completely different, right? Your intention was just, I want to hustle, I need money, I'm a student, I want to have some cash to pay stuff. And that was your intention going into this opportunity, but just naturally, you kind of navigate the space, the environment. And at some point, I also wonder, is it because we don't also place very harsh expectations, firstly on ourselves in that position, because we're not going there to be a promo girl, that's not your dream. Your intention isn't to do that. And then secondly, your expectations of the opportunity is also very... Not a lot. The expectation is effort in, money out. The expectation isn't that this is going to help me understand my purpose and my skill sets in life. And I always wonder, is it because we step in with almost this beginner's mind, right? This no expectation space, that life kind of shows you and gives you the space to figure yourself out, understand what you're good at, your soft skills start to reveal themselves. And it's just beautiful to hear you speak about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that for some people, and including myself, I had this very clear expectation of what I wanted to do and how my life was going to plan out. But that's not how life works out. And that's not always how... life happens. And sometimes you do have to be open to the opportunities that come about and open to letting yourself grow in different spaces. So for me, that was my starting out at TCC. It was I've never done anything like this before, but I'm going to do it and see where it goes. And I gave it my all. I didn't go into it, like you said, I didn't go into it saying this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I still thought that I was going to become an accountant and work, behind a desk for the rest of my life, crunching numbers, even while I was working there. But I honestly I fell into marketing and advertising by accident. And then that became my passion. And I realized that that's actually what I wanted to be doing. So, from there, the rest, as they say, is history.
All right. Before we leave the history in the past, I'd like to ask one more question, because this is a shout out for all of the fellow Indians and immigrants and all of the people who have parents who don't necessarily take so much advice from their children. I think there are a lot of people. I'm putting it as tactfully as I can. I think there are a lot of people who are in this tertiary, in the space, either in tertiary education or heading in that direction, who, they tell this story to their parents about what they want to do and where, they're sure about where they want to go, but deep down inside, they know, they don't actually know where they're going. They don't really like what they're doing. They know they don't want what they currently have, but they don't know what they want. And it's hard to convince your parents that you want to change when you don't know what you want to change to. So 2 questions I have on this topic is, was there anyone in your experience, while you were going through it, that helped you make that decision when you were at the most confused? And then the second is, what advice would you give to somebody who maybe is in a similar space right now?
Sure. So the person that kind of helped me make the decision was my then boyfriend, now husband, who was also he was doing accounting, and that's how we kind of met. And he was kind of the free spirit. We were complete opposites personalities. And I think sometimes you need that type of person in your life to be hold a mirror to you, who said, I can see how much passion this gives you, and how much energy it gives you. And I think that this is something that you need to do. So he kind of helped me navigate the space of putting my profile together for when I was, even though the Creative Council had offered me the permanent job, I still had to kind of go through the process. And I had never done a CV before. I didn't know how it looked. Yeah. And, he was that person that helped me, navigate that and get to work and figure out how public transport, I was taking taxis and buses and in Joburg, getting around, and he was always there trying to help me through. And once I started at the Creative Council, I had a whole bunch of people that helped kind of nurture me, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. Like I often say to people, it was one of the most difficult jobs I've ever done in my life. But if it wasn't for my experience at the Creative Council, I wouldn't be here today. And I have worked at other places between the Creative Council and here at Red and Yellow, but that experience molded me and taught me so much. And specifically Ran, who is the CEO of the Creative Council, kind of like took me under his wing. I was like a junior, and I don't know what he saw specifically in like from a potential perspective or what it was, but I had the opportunity to work on pitches like early and to manage people from a young age and given responsibility that, I might not necessarily have gotten somewhere else. I hope that answers that question. And then
yeah, definitely.
Your second question in terms of it.
The second question was about if a person is in that space, they're unsure where they want to go, but they know where they're going now is not the right place. What would you say to help them kind of like find their way?
I think that we need to just be kind on ourselves, because I feel like the way that the system is structured in South Africa is that we expect people who have had no exposure to any industry to decide like early on in their life what they want to spend the rest of their lives doing. And you expect them to spend their entire high school life working towards something that they've actually never had any practical experience with. And so I think if someone is going through that right now and they find themselves they've gone through their high school career, they've worked towards something, they've gone through a few years and they realize that it's not for them. It's like there's nothing wrong with how you're feeling, because this, it's just the system that you've been through, but that doesn't mean that you have to stick with it, and doesn't mean that you have to be hard on yourself. And I think the second thing is, once you've, been kind to yourself and given yourself the room to figure out what it is that you want to do, is like just to be brave enough to speak up for yourself. Because we want people, and especially like here at Red and Yellow, we say this to our students all the time, we want people to have their own opinion and to be able to speak up for themselves. So speak up, and even if you don't know what you want to do, then ask for help, because we do have, networks, and I think that's the one thing in growing up in an, Indian or Asian community. There are lots of people who have an opinion and that can help you through. And once you speak up, I think ask for help, because you're not in this alone. And once you have that support, it's much easier to find your way and navigate the next steps in your journey.
Sure. Yeah. And I can just imagine your personal experience going through and navigating this career change and thinking about your future massively contributes to your role now at Red and Yellow, and how you see students, how you see and assist and help them make decisions for their future. I don't want to get into that topic immediately, but I just wanted to mention that. I do, however, want to continue looking at your journey. So you spent quite some time at the Creative Council, and then you decided to leave. I'm quite intrigued at what point you made that decision to then leave Creative Council. At that point, did you now see and feel confident that you are, in this industry? You felt confident in the type of role and skills that you want to continue in your career? Because obviously at that point, you had a degree that was, or I actually don't know if you even graduated, but you did, yes. So you had a degree in a...
I did, and then I did an MBA at Wits as well.
Okay, wow. Sure. Wow. So you had this background and degree knowledge that was not directly linked to the role and the, so to say, the responsibilities you had at the Creative Council. So in some essence, did you feel some imposter syndrome after, so much time at Creative Council? Did you finally get to that point where, this is me, I know I'm good at this. I know I can get another job doing this at a bigger company. And what was that like leap then to go to the next company, which was Deloitte?
Yeah, it was scary. It was so scary. I'm not going to even lie. I had been at the Creative Council at that point, I think it was 12 years.
Oh.
And so I was also, again, not typical. I think most millennials at that point were jumping around and trying to get as much experience as possible in different roles. And I think it was a realization that I can't do this forever, and I didn't have anywhere else to go. So I was at the Creative Council through the Publicis acquisition of the Creative Council, and I got the opportunity to help within other countries within Africa to help grow the Publicis network, which was a really, really interesting and exciting experience, and then managed a digital marketing agency within Publicis, and I wasn't like sure what else I could do. So I had this feeling of like, you can't do this forever, but at the same time, like, but why can't I? Because I know the space and I know what I'm good at, and I know that I could do this if I stay here. And I had a conversation with someone who said, you know, like in the consulting space, the side that's not developed yet is the marketing and advertising in the consulting space. And I think that's something that you would really enjoy. Like, why don't you try it out? And that's how that sparked the idea. And because there was a lot of change that happened through the acquisition, I think, and the team was quite different, the timing seemed right for me. And so I went through the process. It was a rigorous process. There was a very intense selection and assessment. I think I spent 6 hours writing. I felt like I was back in high school writing, like, you know, essays and exams and all of that. And then got into consulting. It was interesting. Probably not the best experience of my career. And I think it was also quite different to being in the agency space, because you consult with a client on something, but you don't see it through. And I know, like in an agency space, you also don't necessarily see it through, but you at least have developed a creative identity or a campaign idea. That's the least that you would do to hand over. Whereas here, it's very high level, and it felt very disconnected to me. And I am someone who likes to see things through. So I think, it just wasn't really a right fit for me. But I did make the leap, and it did take a lot out of me to do that. But I think sometimes we do have to get out of our comfort zone and try something new, or else we won't know if we have it in us or not.
Yeah.
Exactly. There was something that you mentioned there that I just want to highlight a little bit before we move forward. And it's that sort of instinct that you sometimes get inside, that you don't know where you're supposed to go, but you've sort of done what you came to do where you are right now. And, you know, you've built this sort of comfortable sort of space for yourself, and you've built a little bit of a reputation. People know who you are. They believe in what you can do and so on. And then one evening or night out, a little voice will come into your ear and be like, it's time to move on. It's time to try something new and difficult. And it's at that point, it's very tempting to just stay where you are, because, I mean, you've got no good reason to move. You're getting great opportunities to travel. You have the opportunity to try new things. You've built a reputation for yourself, and people have gotten to know you. And so there's a lot keeping you where you are. And I think it's really important, even when you find that space, to still be open to change. Because I think that little voice in your ear, it comes to you before you need to move. Because if you stay for too long, eventually you will have to move. Either a bad personality will get involved, or you'll start to get bored, or something of that kind. And I think it's amazing that even without too much of a push, you were still able to sort of see that and move forward into a new challenge. And I mean, as you experience, sometimes that new challenge is not necessarily for the better. but I think the learnings are still worthwhile. And one thing that I would like to get a bit of an idea from your side is sort of where we are now, looking back. If you could sort of redo that decision, would you have still went to Deloitte knowing what you know now, or would you have preferred to stay a little bit longer at Creative Council?
No, I think I would still have done it because I did learn a lot. So whilst it may not have been what I expected, or what it didn't end up being what I wanted to do long term, but I learned a lot. And I think that's important, that we need to take as much as we can out of every experience, because I had invested, a lot into the process, and like challenged myself. And I was like very scared to take the leap. But once I was in it, I did open myself up to learn. And I went into a space where I, was one of the people that knew much less than everyone else. And that's always a good place to be in if you're constantly on this like learning journey and journey of self-improvement, because it taught me to deal with different types of clients that I hadn't dealt with in the agency space. And also a different way of, we always have, everywhere you go, you've got targets, and there's always the commercial side. But this had a different element, a different lens of how to view that, which came in quite handy in this role. So I would still have done it that way.
Amazing. All right. So if we sort of look on the time scale right now, where you're now at Deloitte, you're learning these new things. You're the, I guess, the least experienced one in the group, and you stay there for quite a while, nearly 2 years.
And COVID happens in between.
Yes.
Yes, that small issue. So what happens? What sort of like eventually pushes you to take that next step?
So I had already decided. You mentioned there's that voice that's in your head that's kind of like, yeah. So that was there. I knew that it wasn't what I wanted to be doing much longer, but again, I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And I think, all of us are on that journey wherever we are in our careers. Like, we don't always have it all figured out as much as we look like we do on the outside. And I remember, and it was COVID, and it was crazy. It was a mentally exhausting period, and there was also a lot happening in my personal life at the time, and I was just driving, I think, to get some headspace, and I got a phone call randomly from a former client. So she had been a client of mine when I was at the Creative Council, and she said, we had this chat, and eventually she's like, so what are you up to now? And I tell her what I'm up to, and she says, well, we're looking for someone, and she describes this amazing role, very different to what I had been doing, but it still had the element of the being in a creative and advertising space, but just being on the other side with students and not with in the agency world. And then at the end of the conversation, she said, the only thing is, I said, well, this sounds perfect. She says, well, the only thing is it's in Cape Town. I was like, oh, that's an important point. Because my whole life is in Joburg. My husband's life is in Joburg. I take care of my younger brother who lived with me, still lives with me. His world is in Joburg. I'm not sure this is going to work out. And I said, let me think about it. I'll talk to my husband. I would have loved to go forward with the process, but I can't commit right now. Anyway, I go home, my husband and I chat about it, and it just happened that he got a job offer in Cape Town.
No way.
Crazy.
Wow. Yes.
The stars just like...
It was really tough. I mean, now it sounds like an amazing story, but he didn't have a job for a good 6 months within COVID, and it was really stressful period. And it just happened that the job offer that he got eventually was in Cape Town.
Wow,
and well, he was, he hadn't been working, so for him it was like a no-brainer. And I was just like, are we doing this? Are we like packing up everything and moving to Cape Town? And then I I said to him, well, you take the job offer. I don't have this job yet. I'm going to go through the process.
Oh, yeah, of course. Small detail.
Let's
Like my
hope.
bags.
I was like, okay, Cape Town. And it's like, still have to go through the process. So he took the job offer. I called her back and I said, yeah, tell me what do you need? Like, she's like, send me your CV. We'll go through the interview process. We're interviewing a few people. Let's see where it goes. And 2 months later, we had sold our house and moved to Cape Town. And I took this job that I'm now, 2 years in and absolutely still loving what I do. I think specifically because this current role combines my passion for marketing and advertising. Like I said, I stumbled upon it and has become my passion, but it combines that with like something that's always been a deep desire for me to be able to close the skills and diversity gap that we have in South Africa with the next generation of creative talent. So that's where I am.
Wow. What a great story. Sure. Can just take it in. You just said you love this role because it's giving you that capacity to practice still the marketing and strategy, which you really love. And maybe it's just coming from a bit of ignorance, but when I think about the role of a managing director for a university or institute, I don't necessarily associate it with marketing and coordinating marketing and strategy. Sure, there's a small touch on it because obviously the school needs to advertise. But can you explain a little bit more about the role and why you say it's fulfilling that in you?
Yeah, so good question. We have an excellent head of marketing, and that's what she does. I live vicariously through her. No, I'm just kidding. But I obviously have to oversee the overall strategy for the school in all aspects. But what I meant was when I say it combines my passion for marketing and advertising, it's not the execution thereof, but it's in being able as a school to cultivate that within our students, and I get to see that come to life. So it's not completely closed off. If I was in another institution that maybe didn't offer what we do, I wouldn't have that to lean back on. Whereas here, I'm fortunate that this is what we do. This is what we teach the students. So I can often just walk into a class and I'd see them, creating something or brainstorming, strategizing for a client, a live client brief. And I still feel like that connection. So that's what I mean.
Nice. I love that for you. And I get what you're saying. You previously mentioned you love to see not the bigger picture, but to actually see things happen, things lived out and taken action upon a plan that you've helped create. And I guess being there, you can actually see the life cycle of the input of you and your team, how that plays out and the effects thereof. So I mentioned in the intro of the episode that how I came across your profile was we saw those LinkedIn posts about a conference or an event that Red and Yellow was hosting, and you were the keynote speaker for a specific topic for the metaverse. Now I'm a little bit confused, actually, hearing your background story and all that you've done. And then you're a keynote speaker for the topic of the metaverse. Are you just secretly after hours like dabbling on the metaverse and this is like your creative outlet, or how does that come together?
So yes, so remember the very, very amazing head of marketing that I mentioned earlier. She had this fantastic idea that we as a school were going to run our first conference, and it was going to be, the topic was going to be the metaverse. She had decided this months before, and she said, you are going to speak. What? and like committed this already. So then, of course, as you do, you know nothing about a topic, and you have to go from like zero to hero in like a few months. So I researched everything that I could, and then our head of academics and I went to the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity last year, and got to see a lot more practical examples of how that came to life. So I think coupled with the research that we had done and what we saw come to life at Cannes, we came back and put together a presentation on our key takeouts based on relevance to our students as well as to some of our corporate clients and just people in the industry. And we wanted to focus, I mean, in general, Red and Yellow has always been focused on next generation skills, like in the what's next. And so this was a good fit because a lot of people were asking the question in terms of like, where is it going? How does it impact me? A lot of people have anxiety about like, is this whole thing an AI gonna take my job? Am I going to lose my job? Like, is creativity still relevant? So we just thought that we would put that all together and give people an overview of, you know, where things stand in the metaverse now, how you could still, as a creative in the industry, be designing in the metaverse and some of the use cases for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think especially for the people on the outside who maybe aren't so close to the education space, it might seem like that's a kind of like a small besides the point thing that you're doing. Because, you know, I mean, everyone's coming to learn, like they're not really going to do the metaverse in the next, 1 or 2 years. And it's easy to sort of question why exactly you're spending so much time working on something like that. But I think from my perspective, and especially kind of rubbing shoulders with a few people in the space, more and more I'm getting to learn that one of the big things that's lacking in a lot of education institutions is that appetite for what's coming in the future.
Yes.
It's sort of like, as we sort of talked about at the beginning of this discussion, there used to be like these 5 disciplines: the doctor, the lawyer, the accountant, and like a few people who are relevant, and everyone else is just wasting their time. And there was a time that was true. There was a time where if you were in one of those jobs, you'd do very well, and if you weren't, you wouldn't do very well. But eventually things start to change, technology starts to evolve, new opportunities start to break out. And like, I've always thought that even though businesses have the money to do the research and to kind of get familiar, I've always felt it's the learning institutions who have the most potential, just because they also have the young people who in some sense are native to this space. And they have the time and the opportunity to really do deep research and learning and kind of like follow that voice at the back of your head. And so I think it's really amazing that you guys took the time to introduce something like that to your students, because it's obviously not going to be the whole set of students that are going to be interested in the metaverse. It might just be 5, 6, 10, 15 people out of the whole group that become interested in that. But in a sense, it's almost it's the people who are meant to be interested in it that will pursue it further, and everyone else will sort of go on with their own journey in whichever direction they sort of see fit. What I would like to ask you is, if you were to consider sort of your peers, people in the same sort of space as you, either running an education institution or facilitating any kind of education of any sort, what either guidelines or learnings or tips could you give specifically around bringing the future into the classroom or into the education environment? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it is important for, even people that we might compete with directly to be future focused, because that is the future of the industry, right? Everyone that's coming, whether they're coming from us or another institution, go into the industry, and that's the picture that starts forming of the future industry, because the people who are the legends and award winners now are not going to be there forever. And so for me, it's so important to, even if it is 5 or 6 people like you mentioned, which is pretty spot on after the whole thing, you still have those 5 or 6 people that now have these skills, or at least the mindset to be able to work in a space that's different. Because when you start, your 3-year degree, for example, things are going to look very different in 3 years' time when you come out. So you're sending someone out into a space and you might set them up for failure if you're not exposing them to the things that are new and relevant. And if you're not doing the research and trying to figure out what's coming, you're not equipping them with the skills to go out and hit the ground running. So for us, I mean, it's core to what we do, is that we want to produce industry-ready graduates. And that does mean focusing on what software is new, what tools are out there that helps, designers work differently, how different workplace learning models can assist students to become industry ready. Things like the metaverse and AI and augmented reality. And we need to look at how we not only generate thought leadership, but how we build that into the curriculum, and then how we get the students to start taking ownership of that and start creating their own content about it. And so that when they go into the industry, it's not just like you're piling on a whole lot of information, but you're giving them the opportunity to start thinking about it and start generating their own idea of how it should be.
Yeah. And I think now, thinking back, I believe your head of marketing did a really good job actually pushing you guys to do this conference. Because, there's a few valuable things that came from having this conference and talking about the metaverse. Yes, it's for the students, but it's also in a way to open up the conversation in the broader industry. It is about showing to other potential future students who are not yet enrolling into universities that red and yellow is thinking about what is next, not what is current. It is also showing to the industry who are accepting graduates from red and yellow that this is an institution who is thinking about what is next. So the people coming from this institution have this appetite, have this ability to think forward, to challenge themselves about things that are not really put into tangible techniques, methodologies, or ways of working even just yet. So I think it's a brilliant marketing plan, but also thanks to the head of marketing, because we wouldn't have even been introduced to you today if it wasn't for her brilliant idea.
Yes, that's also true. And I think for other institutions, or even to us, as red and yellow, it's not always easy to build things like this into the curriculum, especially when it's a degree qualification that people are enrolled on. But that's why you bring it in other ways, like industry guest lectures and industry masterclasses and boot camps and online short courses where you get this micro learning experience and get to take in these bits of information. So I know that people might start talking about the restrictions when it comes to programs, but there are ways that you can counter that by, like what I just mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing. And I think even businesses could take a leaf out of that paper, because I think in a sense businesses face the same sort of challenge, because as much as each employee has work that they're supposed to do, they are also learning. And so in some sense, although it's a lot less of their day, they also have this tiny little curriculum for that specific job, which will take you to the next role in your job. And so I think businesses could also do very well to bring out external lecturers or researchers or industry experts or freelancers or whoever it is, but just bring in new knowledge and cross-pollinate with what you have. It ends up having a massive positive impact. But before I dive...
You're so ready there. Just also right there. I just want to say that. And, because business thinks about what will bring us money right now, and entertaining even or educating some of our people in the business about technologies or things that we are not using now and might not ever use in our company might seem like the worst investment of time and resources. but it's so true. Please continue.
No, you are right, because and even with the education institutions, it's like it's not obvious what the positive value is going to be beforehand. That's one of those things that you only see the payback, 2, 3 years, 3, 4 even years down the line, when this person who was kind of like not really focusing in class suddenly is so into the metaverse that no one can get him out. But I think that the other question I'd want to ask on your side, Verusha, is directed at the professionals, because I think one of the what's the word? Intuitions I think I get is that the relationship between the professional environment and the learning environment needs to be a lot closer than it is today. I think there does need to be a lot more collaboration between businesses and business leaders and those leading education institutions. So from your perspective as a person, leading an institution, in what ways do you think businesses could provide value that's mutually beneficial, so both for the education institution and the business? Like, in what ways could they bring value to your environment or your space? Or if there was a business interested in, partnering up or contributing or something of that kind, what are your thoughts on that space?
So employability is a very big deal at Red and Yellow. We don't just care about what our students study, but we care about them going out into the industry and either getting the job of their dreams, or the fact that they have the skills that they need to start up their own business, become a freelancer, gain entry into further study, like whatever their next step is in their chosen career. We want to support that. And so it is a very big deal for us to be involved constantly with businesses and industry, because that doesn't just happen at the end of their qualification. So we have an active industry panel that influence not only our curriculum, but they also give our students exposure to industry players throughout the year. Our students also get to work on industry briefs, so live briefs, where the client actually comes in and briefs them on whatever the challenge is, and they have a few weeks to work on the brief, and then they present back to the client. They get critique, they get feedback, and they get assessed on it. That's part of their curriculum, and that's how we keep the connection going with the industry. Then we also have workplace learning, which is another way that businesses can get involved, because we want them, again, to allow our students to come into the workplace and have a 2 to 3 week dedicated period where they're able to work on projects and get coached while they're in the industry by an industry mentor that gives them feedback before they actually go into their full-on working career. And then we also get, awards are also a big thing. So we, a lot of us and a lot of our faculty are from the industry. So they do have practical experience and advice to share, and that's key. But we also bring in people from the industry to review some of the award submissions so that the students can get first-hand feedback on what it is that someone might be looking for. So those are all the ways that I think businesses can continue to get involved and stay involved with institutions like Red and Yellow, because it does play a huge factor in the level of graduate that goes out into the industry, and then again their level of employability. Yes. Because I mentioned earlier on, like, you're starting at the beginning of the 3 years and things might change later on, and a key thing that businesses and agencies or even marketing or brand managers can contribute is you're in the world, you're in the working world, you're getting the briefs, and you get first-hand experience in terms of what clients are asking for or the trends that you see while the students are still studying. And if you're able to bring that back to the educational institutions while the graduates are still studying, again, we're able to provide that content and give a bit more focus and attention to those things so that the graduates are going out into the industry work ready, and you as a business are getting someone that's coming into work for you that can hit the ground running. I hope that all makes sense.
No, it does. It does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We earlier also touched on you've been on both sides of the wall, Alfie mentioned. And the one is being in industry and working with creatives, being in that space, seeing how competent people are in their own skills, in their own roles. And now you're on the other side and kind of seeing how competent graduates will be once they go into the industry space. So I want to touch on the topic of, because I know you have a lot of knowledge or experience and insights rather to share with anyone that's in industry listening on how to go about when you are looking at hiring graduates. Firstly, because of the generational change that happens from what graduates expect from industry now versus what they expected when the potential hiring manager was a graduate. Then with that being said, I'm also very curious, we've been speaking about what industry can do for business. So you have business people coming in, panel helping you shape curriculum, helping influence graduates, helping educate them by giving them real world briefs so they are employable. Have you seen that businesses, if you have to swap that model around, are businesses more receptive to also coming to institution and asking for not just advice, but for learning more about what's happening on the educational level and how to better receive graduates and better mold graduates? Or have you experimented even with how to have that relationship different, instead you feeding industry with insights on the graduates rather than the opposite way around?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think we have yet. It's probably something we can look into in terms of, obviously businesses would come to us, and if there's a specific gap that they see, they might ask for help training their staff or training a specific client of theirs, etc. But nothing where I think they're actually leveraging that yet. That makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah.
And
you would think that would happen more, and we would want it to happen more, considering you get to see how the generations coming in year after year is different because they grew up with different technologies, a different exposure in society, and that makes them different employees in essence, more on the softer side rather.
So I think that people still have the same picture of the graduates going out. They have this image of what they expect them to be, and they have this perception of what that graduates' expectations are, and that's changed, substantially over the past few years. And maybe that's a point, that question means that people are not really acknowledging yet that they have work to do in trying to understand that better. Because they haven't so far. And I think it was a LinkedIn thing. They released a stat that said that the advertising industry lost 5.5% more talent than it gained over the last 5 years compared to, I know, it's crazy.
That's crazy.
And if you compare that to the tech industry, which gained 23% more talent than it lost over the same period. And it does tell us that a rethink is necessary. And it's more than just simply finding new ways to attract and retain creative talent. You really have to try and understand the fundamentals of what drives the people that you're trying to attract.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, I think you're super right, and you've pointed out something important. And Steph, I think the context of the question is really important, because I think I've also always felt that, and maybe I'm just a little bit more cynical about businesses, but I've just always felt like businesses even struggle to do the things that they were supposed to do. Like, it's like the things that you're speaking. Exactly. I mean, if you, for example, look at how great all of our parastatal organizations are doing, like PRASA and ESCOM and all of that, it's like they can't even do the normal business stuff. To expect them now also to go to education institutions and spark up that conversation, to me, it just seems, let's just get the basics right on that side. And it does mean that there's a lot more work to be done on the side of the education institution. But I think why I see that as a good thing is because I think education institutions they're much more ripe for change than businesses are.
Absolutely.
I think the gap between how much change a business needs to go through for them to be ready to have that conversation with an education institution versus how much change an education institution would need to go through to have that conversation with a business. It's much bigger on the business side. And I think especially when you're in the education institution, it can not seem like that, because more often than not, a business's issue is not that it doesn't have enough money to do a thing. More often than not, it doesn't have the time or focus to do these kinds of things. And it's almost like if you bring, in a sense, a solution that makes sense for both parties to a business, they're open to those kinds of things. But I think it's a little bit impractical to expect them to start the conversation.
Yeah, I think we probably, because we already have to do quite a big job in general trying to convince like parents that going into the creative industry is a viable option for their child. We have to do like a broad industry job, like a perception job with parents. And then now I think what we have to start doing is like an education job with agencies and industry around their view and how they perceive the graduates that are coming into the industry, so that they can start thinking about what they can do differently. Because it's really true that people going into the industry are not automatically attracted to an agency just because they're a big name. And so
that used to be enough.
Exactly. It used to be enough. That and maybe, the big agency paying a few $1,000 more, put those two things together and you would be attracting the top talent. But that isn't the case anymore. So it is an education job that I think we as institutions probably have to start having more of these conversations to get them to realize where things have gone and how things have changed.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting opportunity for a different type of relationship that educational institutions can play, or even not even relationship, but almost like a consistent active role, almost like an advisor for business. Like business comes and say, help me, I have this group of people who aren't really motivated to stay, help us here. Because you get to do that with the students every single day to motivate them to stay in the career, to kind of see if they're motivated, what they do with that motivation, where the motivation comes from. So I think that's an interesting thing to think of. What I do want to ask is, for the people that are listening right now from a business point of view, what can you share with us and with them listening around what graduates' expectations used to be going into the role and how people used to retain talent and the now?
Okay, so I think that the way things have changed is, like I said, it's not just about the pay and the big name brand anymore. And the graduates going out into the industry also want to see that agencies are diverse and that they're bringing in diverse talent. And that, I think, is a big thing for me. People just have this expectation that, I'm going to I'm not going to name any brands, but I'm a big agency and I'm paying this much, and it doesn't matter what our level of diversity is. As long as this is a top student and we can match those two, then they're going to come to us. And that's not the case anymore. And a stat that can also back that up, because I'm also all about the facts, is we run it's not just my sentiment, but we run an employability survey with our students 6 months after they leave, and we just got the results from last year's survey. And the top reasons why graduates selected the job or the role that they're currently in, pay was number 6.
Wow.
So,
that is so far down. 6.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of 5 different things that can go above that, and I'm like struggling to think of more than 3 off the bat.
The top 3 things were culture. Then it was being most closely aligned to what they were looking for in terms of their career aspirations. And then it was how much of a connection they felt to the role and the type of work that they would be doing. And I mean, like, just take that in, because it is a big shift. And I think, like, if you had done the survey a few years ago, well, I don't think I know, it would have been pay or the prestige of the brand or the institution that had made them an offer. And even more so when I look at, they are, on the survey, they go on to list all of the companies that they end up working for. And I can't even recognize some of the names because they're like niche boutique agencies. And then we have conversations with the graduates when they come in to collect, either their transcripts or final results or whatever. And they've started working, and ask them, how it's going. And they keep saying that it's, they can relate to the work that they're doing. They feel valued. They feel like the work that they're doing matters. And so they often talk about the environment and the culture and what the company stands for. So those are some of the things that I think that we need to focus on, because we don't. In the past, it was about you worked your way up by working the longest hours, and we will often like put that under the guise of you've got to do it because you need experience. But now if you're going to institution, and not that you don't need the experience, you do. Of course you need experience to move higher up, but you need the experience coupled with being mentored, being given guidance, being given the space to grow and to think on your own, and creating a space that encourages free thinking. So I'm not gonna talk too much about the pay side and the long hours, but some of the things that I think it was TBWA that also did a global survey on the future of talent in the industry. And one of the quotes, I'm gonna actually pull it up. It says like, long hours without recognition or reimbursement under the guise of experience has just continued to create extremely low morale among staff coming in, with multiple stories of mental health issues due to expectations at a senior level. And that's kind of been what the industry has expected. So in that survey, they also said, and this is some of the things that we need to look at, is work-life boundaries, because that's one of the big things that often comes up when we chat to our students and when we chat to them when they go into the industry. They want an employer that actually helps them get a balance between their personal and professional life. They want to have stability. So I think like we would often, especially in the agency world, like you would take the junior people, they'd work 3 days on a brief and then they're not even finished on that one, and then there's a more urgent brief that comes in, and then you move them over and they've got to like completely refocus their mindset and try and work on this new client and new brief, and you expect them to just click. They want stability in the work that they're working on, and they want I think, what is it called now, mind maintenance. It's like the new buzzword. it's just important to be in a space that provides them care for their mental health and proactively supports their emotional well-being, because those are the things that they're looking for.
I just quickly want to say, I'm actually, this conversation's making me feel very hopeful in the way that this generation that is needing different things from their employment or their career will help all of us, because this is probably things all of us also want, but don't necessarily demand. But this new group of graduates, new employment group, are going to be more demanding on these needs, and it's actually going to benefit all of us. But what I did, the one thing you said, which stood out to me, is they want to do work that is towards a purpose they can relate to and that they are passionate in. And one thing that's interesting about that is it makes me, I'm hoping this is going to play out in the future. And I'm not just being a big optimist, but it makes me feel like the type of businesses and organizations that we will see in 10, 20 years from now will serve a better purpose, because the people that built those businesses did it with, like you said, with a purpose, right? It's not, I'm not going to build and work on an organization that's product actually makes people's lives more difficult, because that's not a purpose I can relate to. So if a lot of people say no to that, does that mean the type of organizations and businesses that will come about in the next 10 years will actually be so much better for the world and people, and less bad businesses and products?
I mean, I hope so. I can only hope so that it will have a larger shift. But just one thing I want to say on this point is, like, I also don't want to create the expectation for people going into the industry that you're always going to be able to work on something that you relate to and that you love. And I say this to our graduates every year when they leave as well. Like, some tips for your first, official job. You won't always get to work on stuff that you love, and that's okay. But treat every brief as if you do, and you'll always continue to push the boundaries and on the creative side and deliver work that inspires. But I think the call out is that rather than giving these people going into the industry no work that they can relate to and that inspires them, we have to start finding a balance, because it won't be all or nothing from both sides. But we have to start bringing that in and being able to give people the opportunity to do that. And it is, like when you said it, you have hope. I do too, because I think the fact that like someone as big as the TBWA, presented something like this at Cannes, at the Cannes Lions, is heartening, because it does suggest that the creative industry and players at a global level are open to having the conversation.
Yeah, that is amazing. Sure. That is amazing. I think we're coming around to the closing stages of this discussion, and it has been an absolutely amazing ride so far. I think both myself and Stephanie have picked up quite a bit, but I think especially for our listeners that are either in the professional space or still building themselves up as a student, I think they can all sort of pick something valuable out of this conversation. So first of all, Verusha, thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Good.
And then I think maybe for the people listening, is there, I don't know if you write anything or share any of your thoughts anywhere, but if there are people who are interested in your journey or some of the work that you're doing, is there somewhere they can follow?
I haven't in a while, but it's on my to-do list for this year to be better at it. So the best thing would be to follow me on LinkedIn, Verusha Maharaj. And I might take a while to get back to people, but as Stephanie would know, I do reply. So if anyone also wants to pick my brain on anything, they're more than welcome to. do that.
Amazing. Cool, guys. For everybody listening, thank you very much for your time. It has been a great conversation. And as you heard, if you're interested in engaging with Verusha, reach out on LinkedIn. But otherwise, thank you. And till next time.
See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.